All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Depend on the time you choose to actually tune in to watch this broadcast and not the lecture for today. Um, Today we're having a lecture. We'll continue on chapter two of coursework, sourcing and procurement. So today we'll be looking at sourcing and procurement process and procedure, and it's going to be a lengthy class. I hope we can actually, um, you know, try to keep up with what we have to do. All right, so I'm going to project my slide, and we're going to have to see what we're doing together. Of course, we saw last class. We saw what we did in last class, the basic introduction of sourcing and procurement. We saw, a simple definition of what sourcing and procurement is. I believe we can define sourcing and procurement, and I believe, of course, we can say or discuss one or two things regarding uh, procurement, supply chain management, and of course, we actually delve and looked at different form of sourcing, collaboration in and supply strategies and supply solutions. We look at collaborations. We even delve into inventory management a little. We delve into ICT. We delve into VMI. Of course, these are some of the things we actually dealt with, and I believe we have uh, we've read our materials and we are good. Okay, today we'll be looking at sourcing and procurement, procedure and processes. Of course, here we'll be looking at different procedures, different processes that you as a procurement specialist or a supply chain expert will have to go through to ensure that you know you're catching up or you have got you are getting to do the right thing in your buying processes. And in this course, what we'll be covering will include something like understanding the different type of sourcing structures that we're going to talk about. At the end of the course, you should be able to know the key strategies in sourcing and procurement processes. And you should also know how to develop price and pricing strategies. And you should be able to know how to develop and understand legal issues relating to contract and dispute when it comes to tendering or making a buy or making a process. And of course, we believe you should be able to understand the different type of sourcing structures. All right. So first and foremost, for you to define the first process or procedure for sourcing and procurement is for you to understand um, your objective. Now, every procurement should have an objective, and of course, when you buy, when you source product, you should have a core objective in your mind, and of course, the objective will determine the various activity uh, you want to flow with. And of course, classically, we'll look at a classic definition of purchasing by what we call the five rights. Now, what is that five right? We talk about that. Your objective for procurement should be defined as securing supplies, materials, service, all right, of the right quality in the right quantity at the right time from the right place at the right cost and at the right cost. All right. So these are the rights that should guide these rights should guide your buying process. What are the rights? What right am I saying? The right quality, the right quantity, the right time, all right, from the right place, which is the source, and the right cost. All right, the costing is the price. Another aim for procurement or in terms of the procurement objective is to obtain or buy, or buy goods in the right quantity, like we said, of goods or the right quality, the right cost, delivered to the right place at the right time. And we can have another right, all right, and one of course the right source or right supply. So we're going to look at some of all these rights and see how procurement process can add value in order that these rights are achieved. And to provide, and also we're going to look at uh, this in depth. All right, and we must understand that to actually provide interface between uh, customer and supplier in order to obtain, store, distribute. goods as necessary like supplies of materials, goods and service to enable organizations to satisfy the external and internal customer. And these objectives should guide that purpose of uh, providing the right interface for customers, provide the right interface for suppliers, and also allow each and every one of them to order, all right, or plan an order to obtain, all right, goods wherever possible, store the goods, and also distribute the goods as necessary, all right, and of course, make the supply get to the last man who needs it, of course. And for this to be done, both the internal and external customer would need to be seen to be satisfied in this entire process. And of course, this is another figure to show the right quality, the right time, the right quantity, the right place, the right price. Of course, we'll look at them in depth as it concerns the five right. Now, let's look at the right quality. Now, what is quality? Now, quality is the degree of level of excellence as perceived by the customer. All right. It is not what is perceived by the supplier or what is seen to be perceived by the customer. But meanwhile, it may also be viewed as the product or service being fit for purpose, fit for use, all right, and fit for what it is meant to do. So simply put, quality is conformance to specification. And if, for example, a specification is also a statement of requirement, then we can see how the right links up with each other and the role uh, each person will play. The role the buyers will play to ensure that the right quality uh, is gotten, and of course, and it's feeded into the organization production or transformation chain. Of course, remember, quality is the degree of level of excellence as perceived by the customer. And of course, when we talk about the right quantity, and the right quantity, of course, to be ordered or to be bought by either the buyer and sold by the supplier, will attempt to balance the requirements for both parties. Somebody is buying, somebody is willing to sell. All right. So the right quantity rewards in terms of demand, and also you look at it in terms of supply. So if taking a while, if you're looking at a wider procurement or supply chain management view, then possibly collaboration or partnership method will be used uh, for supplier customer relationship to better balance the requirement of buying in the right quantity. So if you are buying for maybe user department or internal customer, the right quantity is provided in the internal requisition document or the other level that we will discuss again. Of course, we're going to discuss some of these things like other specification. So you will be required to assist in needs for other purchases to establish the right quantity. And the issue here to get the right quantity into any organization is to ensure that there's a good, strong line and a good line of communication between all parties to ensure that the right quantity comes into the organization. It's not going to be okay if an organization ordered uh, maybe five cartons of raw materials. At the end of the day, they can only afford to get two because of poor communication. All right, so we look at this other right, the right time. Of course, the right time can be divided into two: the right time to buy, all right, and the right time for goods to be supplied into the market or to be delivered into the market. Now, when we talk about the right time, the right time can be influenced by so many things. All right, now it's from it in terms of to the right time to buy. Uh, you can look at the right time to buy will be influenced by the availability of the product, by the market condition, by understanding different competitions within the market, purchasing policies of the organization, customer demands will also affect the right time to buy a product. Of course, the right time to deliver or supply a product to the market will will be influenced by the supply lead time from initial need to when the product is available to use, and also organizational requirements will also affect influence the delivery, and also customer demand uh, that also will be influenced also. Then we look at the right place. Now, what the right place is talking about is saying uh, that when you purchase an item, there's a need that the item can actually get to the last man who needs it or maybe the right place could be defined as the source, that you're getting the product from the right source. All right. So purchasing needs to ensure that the product or service are bought from the right supplier, from the upstream in the supply chain. And once the source has been identified, the market condition you will need to be assessed, and the former supplier appraisal will be needed depending on the spend or volume or even risk. So downstream, it's also often the responsibility of purchasing to ensure that the material, the product, or service are delivered to the right place, all right, and not to the wrong location. All right. So we look at this other one called the right price. Now, this is actually challenging in the sense that what we call price. Price is actually a value you place on something in monetary terms. Value placed on an item, goods, or service in monetary time. So the key factor in determining the right price uh, can be, for us to understand it, should be broken down. And of course, when you're looking at the right price, you're looking at something like, should include direct cost of an item and the indirect cost of an item, along with its profit margin that is allowed within the organization. Now, of course, where you are purchasing something like a capital equipment, for instance, you're putting a machine, a truck, a vehicle, or when you're purchasing all these kind of capital equipment, you look at something called the total cost of ownership. All right, you apply it for the right price, and this costing philosophy that also includes the value. It will include the value as also the total cost of ownership viewpoint, and it also sees the benefit of ownership that will come when value added to the business through owning the assets is greater than the total cost of ownership. So, in this concept, for you to understand the right price, the total cost, which is um, uh, total cost of ownership is seen to be right, where price is equal to it. I mean, right? I mean, price is added to the total cost of acquisition and also to the life cycle cost or whole life cycle cost. All right, to give you the total cost of ownership. What is saying generally is that when you buy a car can be sold, for instance, for 1 million naira, and of course, another car sold for, let's say, 1.5 million naira. Now, you won't look at that based on because you are buying it at that price. You look at the total cost that you will, I mean, the total acquisition cost, which is 1 million naira, the life cycle cost, in terms of the cost of maintenance. All right. The cost of no, the price is 1 million naira. The total cost of acquisition, we look at maybe the price. I mean, the vehicle is in Lagos, for instance. You look at, okay, I'm bringing it out from the port, I'm shipping it from the country. So in terms of acquisition, we look at, you're shipping it, you're clearing it from the Nigerian port, you get a driver that will drive it to Abuja. Those are costs, and of course, everything that is needed within the port area is a cost of acquisition. I mean, acquiring it. Then you look at the life cycle cost. The life cycle cost, or we call it the whole life cycle cost, is actually the cost while you are driving the car. What is the maintenance? What maintenance do the car need? Is the car taking much maintenance, like that, like that, like that? So this is how you can, I mean, agree to understand that if you are buying at the right price, you must consider what we call the total cost of ownership. You apply that philosophy to get to understand uh, if you are buying at the right price. All right. Of course, like we said, low life cycle costing is defined as systematic consideration of all relevant revenue associated with the acquisition of an ownership of an asset. Like I said, maintaining the car, the cost of the fueling, the cost of the spare parts, and all sorts of things. Then you look at also consider something like what we call the initial cost of procurement, the future cost, the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is telling you um, if I decide to invest this money somewhere, of course, alternative investment, how much would that investment give to me for than going for this other side, this form of production? Of course, you look at the structure of procurement function. Now, in terms of purchasing and supply function, it will actually depend on the company strategy. Sometimes it depends on their buying, the kind of buying that is carried out within the organization from their inventory or their store or their warehouse function. So but when you look at the terms of purchasing, it will be more appropriate to actually define the core function where the buying is taken from for you to get the structure done. So some of the factors that you look at that might likely influence how company organize themselves, or organize the structure of their procurement or the organization of their procurement will include: one, e-commerce. All right, e.g., the rapid flow of information through their platforms, or like your RFIDs, EDI, their barcoding, their POS system. Globalization, of supply source market, would directly affect how the structure of their procurement system might look like. Of course, also the policy of their inventory. Then technology improvement in terms of production, in terms of the logistics of the movement, will also affect the structure or influence the structure of their procurement. And third-party service provider also are factors that can influence the structure of any supply chain. All right, and there are two broad extreme uh, structure we will look at, consider in organizing procurement function. And the advantage put forward in terms of, first and foremost, what we talk about, we're looking at the concept of centralization or decentralization of procurement function. Now, the structure can come in the form of either a centralized organization can choose a structure of centralizing their procurement. Other organization can choose the concept of what decentralizing their procurement. But each of the structure you put, either centralizing or decentralizing, have its own advantage and also disadvantage. Of course, uh, when we talk about advantage of centralization, like the word centralization, it means all the buying of the organization is centralized at the center. The decision is made at the center. The buying is made at the center. What to buy is made at the center. Then, of course, you realize that if that is done, it comes with the following advantage. One of them is that it gives an economics of bulk buying advantage. It leads to avoiding competitive buying of short supply item from within the organization themselves. It actually has an advantage of allowing specialist products or service buyers and more research development on the product that is to be bought. But then it allows opportunity for fewer larger orders are placed. Instead of placing order frequently, you place once and the order comes in large quantity. There's also the benefit of common procedures and documents, and also specifications. All right. There's an advantage of simple or simpler supply relationship as single point of contact. Of course, there's also an advantage of more opportunity for spreading of best practice and learning within the procurement function. Then, of course, the decentralization. The other one we spoke on was decentralized, and the decentralized procurement function. Advantages we include closer contact with the department in the organization, and also sometimes you get more day-to-day and hands-on contact and control. All right, within the organization. And also you have local buyers because it's decentralized. So sometimes you buy locally and allow local buyers and better information or inform about their local, by their local suppliers. Then, of course, because you're buying locally, if you're decentralized, most of the time, is the fact that you get more specialized knowledge on what you're buying, all right, of the product that is being manufactured. And of course, because decentralization also have the advantage of clear responsibility for those at the local management level. Now, of course, if you look at this chart look at matching what a company does or circumstances which the company operates to their kind of structure, the position structure that might be in the organization. For instance, if you have an organization where you have single product with multi-site, what I mean is they might be producing maybe just one product. Let's say they are producing Omo or they are producing a more cup, for instance, just more cups. Then, of course, you will tell me, you agree with me that what they need to do is to have what we call a centralized purchasing, because it's just one product, or they have different sites spread across the country where they sell their products. And of course, example, you see a distribution party, the third party distribution companies that uh, come with this one. Of course, when you have an organization that have a multi and related product with multi sites, different products, it means they are producing more cups, they are producing, let's say, hand sanitizers, they are producing, let's say, eyeglasses, multi-product like that. And of course, they are reaching out to, they have different sites or regional distribution centers across. Uh, um, One of the common thing that is seen in terms of their purchasing structure is that common item could be specialized with specific item purchased locally. All right, what like common item that is needed will be actually for producing of that product will be centralized, and other product, I mean other related specific product that is suited for that locality where the production is taking place will be actually localized. Then of course you can have when you have a product or organization that deals with that has multi unrelated products. All right, the first one can be multi-related product. Like, let me give an example. The first one I just said, okay, the first example I made, this second one will be related to detergent. This first example, let's assume a soap-based product. You have detergent, you have bar soap, you having liquid soap. Of course, you realize there are similar active ingredients in that one. But of course, for this one that has multi-unrelated products with multi-site, it means example are wine and spirit conglomerates. What they do is they have divisional level of purchasing. The purchasing is done at divisional level, not necessarily centralized, not necessarily decentralized. Then you have organizations like multinationals like Toyota who assembles car. What you realize is the global value for most of this policy of this multinational organization with much local or regional autonomy depends on their circumstance. So, like Peugeot Nigeria, let me give an example. The Peugeot that is built in Nigeria might be actually different from that built in France because there are different regulations, there are different local standards that will affect the cars that are manufactured. Specification and standard will affect them. Of course, public sectors like a local government will have local purchasing with some centralized consortia form of buying. All right. Um, Now, at this stage, let's look at purchasing cycle. All right. Purchasing cycle, the cycle of purchasing is we'll look at the pre-order, the order, and of course the post-order. Now, in this small little purchasing cycle, we will talk extensively on how procurement is done. We will examine the stages in purchasing cycle. We'll look at the needs and aspects of when you're purchasing by the five rights and the total cost model. We'll also look at understanding the concept of specifying specification and standard. And of course, we'll look at supplier and market conditions, including using pest analysis and also to analyzing the market before you buy. Of course, your sourcing requirements and options, we'll look at that. We'll look at tendering evaluation, and we'll look at negotiation, which is the last one we'll look at in this area. Let me pause for a little and I'll come back. Let me go. Let me pause for a little and go for my water break. Then we'll continue later. All right, let's welcome back. So let's go dive straight into this purchasing cycle. Now, example, this is the purchasing cycle wheel, giving you the entire process and procedure and steps that are involved in purchasing. First and foremost, for purchasing to start, there must be a need that the purchasing is looking at meeting the need. Then, of course, there's also the concept of the next stage is specify. Then, of course, once the specification is gotten, then the organization needs to actually get sourcing the product, the right product. And of course, in sourcing the right product, there's the concept of inquiry, tenders, evaluation of tenders, and also negotiating with the right tender. Then you place your order, track for progress, then of course deliver, then pay your supplier, then you go your step to review your step again. All right. So the purchasing cycle, um, you realize has three key stages: the pre-order stages, the order stage, and the post-order. The pre-order stage is the contract, we call it the contract stage. The order stage is a contract, and the post-order is also a contract stage. Now, what are the activity that takes place in the pre-order? First and foremost, we see need is another activity that takes place. Need requirement, specify, sourcing, inquiry, evaluation, negotiation, selecting the right one. Of course, we'll cover this in this section. Are the pre-order contract stage. Then the other stages, you have ordering, checking for progress, expediting the work that needs to be done, delivery, giving of receipt. Of course, these are also the other stages. Then the post order looks at getting payment, invoice verification, and also reviewing the process again. All these will be covered in this process. But of course, in chapter 4, we'll deal with performance measurement and control in sourcing and supply. Now let's talk about the first stage, which is need. We are going to examine each of those stages from the order stage to the pre-order stage to the order stage. I don't think we'll dwell more on. We'll just talk everything from the pre-order stage. The concept of won't dwell too much on the other stage, which is paying order. No, those ones are systems that can be tracked. But of course, one of the major things that needs to be looked at when you're sourcing is getting it right at first. So the pre-order stage is very, very important and very critical for the success of the entire, buying process. So procurement cycle that we see always begins with the identification of need. That is what are our requirements, and this may take any form. It can take many forms, e.g., it can take forms like components, raw materials. They need to get a component, they need to get raw materials, they need to get sub assembly parts. So they need to get some part of what's needed. So in maintenance, and also sometimes cases of you need to actually even source for service issues. You source for maintenance where you need to source for maintenance. So one thing that you must understand and you must know is that our role as procurement specialists is to maintain a smooth flow of information between various other people and function within the supply chain. All right. So what are the things that are needed? What are the activities in the concept of need? Of course, there's what we call under requisition. All right, where for instance there's a need is generated or a requisition form is generated from the internal user or customer. Then of course initial requisition will be placed, the need will be identified. All right, then either the user or the customer will now state the need in the form. All right, you can have some of them using something like product coding, maybe for routine items and the rest. And also, you know, once they fill the requisition form, they actually put details like the name and details of the user or the department I want to use or the customer. It ensures that the internally allocated. It ensures that once the code is dropped, of course they know the name or the name of the department or whoever is ordering it. So in case anything comes, we understand the right person is getting it. Then of course the item details is also another part of the detail that is kept, will be in the requisition form in the requisition form. And the item detail will provide enough in-depth um, analysis or details on how that will enable the procurement manager ensure that they get the right place to source the product from. And of course, two more details will restrict the buyer ability to identify potential sources. So the advantage and disadvantage in terms of details. Of course, in the requisition form, of course, the internal customer will need to state when they need the product to be delivered to the organization, and this will be required either for to direct the customer or into store. I mean, where it will go into storage and how it will come. Of course, the signature of whoever is authorizing it will be in the requisition form. Then, from the need, once that is done, then of course there's a need for us to specify. All right. Specification generally is a description of what a customer or user wants, and therefore they communicate it um, to the needed. They communicate what is required to meet those needs. And of course, specification are also statement of need from internal sources within the organization that is to be satisfied by the procurement of an external supply source. And of course, specification do not need to be. Specification do need to be clear. All right, it must be clear at when it is being communicated. It must be clear that the details of what is needed are communicated to the relevant department that will be handling the procurement. So that when, especially when you're dealing with spare parts, bolts, screws, parts that sometimes the size, they are seriously different. They are different varying sizes that you see. Of course, so there is a need for those things to be communicated, and of course, and in communicating this, it varies from industry to industry how their specification are sometimes classified or coded so that confusion does not set in. All right, in terms of product, the type and the specification that is needed. So because if you go from one industry to another, you realize that standard will change. All right. And one thing I want us to notice that standard differs from specification. The difference between standard and specification. While every standard is a specification, not every specification is a standard. All right. So standard are all about obtaining the expected, performance or the expected output from the use of a product or service. So understand this, that standard differs from specification. While every standard, all right, is a specification. While every standard is a specification, all right, not every specification is a standard. All right. So in getting specific, in detailing a product specification, the concept of coding has been adopted in most industry, especially either using what they call a barcode. Now, yes, what this one is telling me is that you can have a product. For instance, let's look at a product specification like a basic household need. If we may look at Bonvita, for instance, or Nestle Milo, for instance. Now, the Milo comes in different varying size shapes. All right, you have the Milo you have in sachet, you have Milos you have in tin. Of course, apart from having a Milo in tin and in sachet, you have Milo that is bigger in gram, you have a medium, you have a small grammage. Same thing for the sachet. You have a bigger gram in the sachet, you have a medium gram, you have a small gram, you have a micro small gram. So, of course, and when you look at every product, there's a concept of a barcode line around it. And of course, one of the reasons we code is that coding provides a unique identifier per product, per line. All right. Coding also prevents duplication of stocks. All right. Coding provides standardization for the goods. All right. Also, coding also simplifies product identification for all suppliers, customers, and users. Also, coding can help in determine stock location, especially when you're operating in the warehouse or looking for the goods in the warehouse. Of course, like I said, you give me the example of Milo. Coding assists in pricing and costing where possible. Then, of course, we look at we look at questions that we need to ask ourselves when we are drafting down specification. Of course, specification for specification to comply with. Now, some of the questions you might need to ask if you are drafting a product specification for your organization will be one, for example, are the requirements stated clearly when we're as in designing a product specification for items in an organization? Are they unambiguous with only essential characteristics stated? You want to ask questions, will it enable suppliers to decide and cost their offers? You want to ask questions like, will the supplier or will the specification comply with the question? All right, I'll come again. Or will your supplier, you know, will it confer with the supplier offer to be evaluated against the specification? You ask questions like, does the specification enable the opportunity for a supplier to make an also you want to look at, does it include any legal requirements um, where it can be stated clearly. I want to take us so I want us to understand that when it comes to specification, there are different forms specification may take. All right, we have what we call technical specification, sample specification, specification. Um, we have what we call design specification, we have function specification, we have form specification, we have performance specification. All these are examples of specification that you can have in any industry as it may seem. See, so from user specification, um, existing coding purchasing is then better to provide. You look at from the from the user area, it provides information on advantage to provide information on available supply. All right, so these are some of the existing examples or advantage of specification from the end user's perspective. First, to the end user, it will provide information on available supply. It also provide supplier appraiser. The user can be able to appraise the supplier. It also provide identify risk on suppliers and products, and also identify where the business uh, will be able to standardize going forward in the future. Of course, the following questions can also be asked, um, and the answer in determining the objective performance now of any specification. What are the questions? What need to be asked for us to clearly define the objective performance of any product specification? First, is it clear? Clarity, competence. All right, is it competent enough? Do the knowledge and skill exist? Consequence, why is it being done? All right, competition, what other tasks are there to do? All right, consideration, who else is to be involved? Control, how is it known to be, to be desired, and satisfactory has been really, our satisfaction has been hit. Then, of course, you talk about commitment. Do they have confidence to do willingly and well? Then you talk about, lastly, context. Are the right surroundings and support available for the product you're designing the specification for? All right. Then we move from specification to sourcing. Before now, in chapter one, and of course, we've noted the strategic nature of sourcing. All right, and the process of sourcing that relates can be, complex. All right, and all the process are kind of interrelated. But of course, and because you're sourcing from an external environment, there's a possibility of exposing the organization to different risks. Now, and the truth be told, before you venture, you must understand and identify different very requirements for where you need to make sourcing from. Like, of course, once you have you have identified the requirement and you have reassessed your requirement for future need. The next important one of the important things you will look at is to conduct a supply market analysis. All right, the market analysis is important. Sometimes we call it macro environment scanning. Now, this is very important value adding activity to your procurement activity, because as a procurement manager, you should proactively engage in obtaining the strength, the weakness, of course, the opportunity and threat of your business environment that will affect your procurement process. Of course, what I just mentioned, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat, is known by the acronym SWOT, SWOT. Then, of course, there are also various models you can use to analyze um, the environment. You can use to analyze product. You can use to analyze services. Another example will include your PLC, product life cycle. Of course, if you go to inventory management, we talk about product life cycle. Tells you the product life cycle tells you the different age or maturity stage of different products you're dealing with. Now, when we talk about maturity stage of products you're dealing with, you look at their product that are just being introduced. Yeah, they're in their research phase, and of course, they are being introduced, and of course, they need to grow, and of course, they are matured. You realize when the product is either in a research or introductory phase, you have little or no experience in using that product. So it now determine how you can source that product or how you wish to get that product. Maybe you choose the quantity. Well, what we call the five forces. The forces that Porter looks at in this one include the specific powers available within the environment of a business. Like one, the buyer's power, the power the buyers have over the product you are trying to source, the supplier's power, I know the supplier powers over the product you're sourcing, especially in the monopolistic market. You talk about existing competitors, and you look at because both of you will source your product from same market, and of course you talk about the threat of new competitor. This also can be used. Of course, we have what we call PESTO. PESTO, will discuss more of that later. PESTO is an acronym for politics, economic, social, cultural, technology, legal, and also environment. All this will be analyzed later as we forge ahead. Of course, there's a need for you to use these tools to analyze your environment. Like the personal analysis, for example, talk about political consideration with view of government and policies in countries from which you are buying. Now, let's say, for example, now where politics come in and you are buying. Now, imagine your major raw material is coming from Russia, and the major currency we use for international trade comes with the dollar. Now, with the sanction placed on Russia, most countries that get their raw material from Russia will find it incredibly difficult to source product from Russia because of the political embargo that has been laid. All right. And of course, economy also consideration regarding the terms of employment or the kind of finance resources available within a country will affect the level of supply and demand for the product you want. You are trying to manufacture for that economy. Then, of course, you talk about what have you, social cultural. If you consider social cultural, you're looking at the people, how many people are employed, all right, to produce what you are trying to source and manufacture them. Are they skilled enough? Did they even like it? Of course, the social culture also affect the taste and the cultural level of what they buy in terms of when you look at some products that are halal, in terms of consumer product and the rest. Then technology, advancement, and the possibility of alternatives will also help you in your sourcing strategy. And legal requirements and contractual documents is also a thing that one will want to consider. The environmental consideration is key, and in terms of policies and supplies that got to do with issues of environmental issues that may either allow your organization go to the next level or stop. Affect what you buy and how you buy. Then, of course, we have what we call. Let's look at the concept of the market condition of when you're buying a product. Now, if you look at this chart, it shows you that there are different metrics. All right, there are about four very metrics that is determined on two things. One, remember Porter five forces: supplier's power, buyer's power. Now, based on those two, if you are trying to buy or you work in an environment where the supplier power, all right, is low and the buyer's power is low, now you realize that in that economy, in that area, what you have is you have independence. No, the risk in operating that environment is reduced because it means you, as the producer of that product, you have the power because you're independent of either the supplier or you're independent of either, of the power, of the buyers. Now, if you operate in a market where you have high supplier power and a very low buyer's power. Now, that market is determined to be a supplier dominant market, a supplier dominant market. And in this case, it means, the supplier is can call the shots on what happens, especially when they are producing a monopolistic a monopolistic market. Like, say example, the crude oil available in Nigeria, and I need to open a refinery. And in the refinery product, now for me to get my crude in Nigeria, we realize that it's only one person that sells crude in Nigeria, and of course I need to rely on government under NPC to buy crude from. Then of course, if you operate in a market where the buyer's power is very high and the supplier's power is low, that's a buyer's dominant market. The buyers call the shots to determine how far you can go. The quality, the quantity of what you are producing or you're sourcing is determined by them. Then, of course, if you have a market condition where both, high supplier power, high buyer power, then of course, there's a concept of you introducing the concept of interdependence between yourself. So you need to find a way to move across and make the right buy purchase. Then, of course, you have what we call subcontracting. We have different option when you're making sourcing a product, especially when you're making a contract. Now, when we talk about subcontracting options, subcontracting may be appropriate where resources are finite. All right, as the cost and risk, we clearly indicate that this option is the most viable. Alternatively, the subcontractor may have to greater experience. So buyers will need to ensure that the performance measure have been clearly defined for subcontracting, and all legal consideration be covered before you actually go into contracts. Now, let's give an example of options available while you're sourcing. We have sourcing option from economic sector. Here, in most markets, price will overall be governed by the normal economic supply and demand elasticity of normal forces of demand and supply elasticity. So, but sometimes, however, some markets like the monopoly market, oligopoly, demand and supply are not directly affected by price elasticity whatsoever. All right, but we can have sourcing in the particular market based on the economic sector. We can have sourcing option based on existing or new sources, in the sense that some advantage of using existing supplier are that they can provide you very good information on performance from maybe historical data, and of course based on how you've dealt with them. But additionally, they have knowledge of normal practices, policies, and expectation. That becomes an advantage of using an existing supplier rather than using a new supplier. So if you are changing to a new supplier, it has its own advantage. You can actually go with price for them, but understand that there are costs of changing as well as the element of risk involved of using somebody new and bringing somebody new in sourcing your product within your organization. Of course, you can have also other options like sourcing options when you are looking where to buy the product, either locally or you want to source globally. All right, local supplier have the advantage of offering you shorter lead time, lower transportation costs, along with other risk and costs associated with global logistics. All right, there's one rule when you are sourcing is the fact that you only source when the product is not, I repeat, you only source when the product is not available within your local area. If it's not available in your local area, you go within your regional to check. If it's not available in your region, then you can now cross the boundaries of your countries to check globally where you can see. Of course, globally proximity, will also be checked. If the product, if you can check within West Africa, if it's not available in West Africa, you check, within Africa before you go to Asia to look for the product. They will also have sourcing option for that you want to source from multiple source or you want to source from a single source. Understand that multiple sourcing and always encourage competition and innovation, and it also protect against risk of having all having you put all your eggs in one basket. So single sourcing could only be considered where the market dictates there's only one supplier, where the supplier has more power. You can consider single sourcing where the value and usage defines the material or product as critical. Also, you can use single sourcing in order to Also, maybe get long-term relationship of product that can be negotiated for a simpler price. Or sometimes, there's this, when you have a significant financial advantage which the organization believes outweigh a perceived risk, of using one single source. So these are some of the conditions that might be full. Of course, let's look at the concept of you know the next stage, which is bid evaluation. You know, um, we've looked at sourcing. Now we're looking at how you can actually evaluate the source of your product. Now, for instance, we talk about you know the inquiry and the evaluation process. Um, Now, how do you do that? Now, there's a need. You've gotten the specification request. You've looked at how you can source. Okay, I have analyzed my market. Is this single sourcing? Am I doing multiple sourcing? Now you're now making inquiry and evaluation. How do you make inquiry? All right, you are requesting for information. This information may take a form of what we call pre-qualifying a supplier, or pre-qualification is also, is used to invite the best supplier to apply for a potential business, and it also ensures that the supplier conforms to certain required criteria before a further detailed information is provided. Now, inquiry by requesting information, we always use a standard request form that make clear to all who will receive it. Like, for instance, look at the mandatory condition to be fulfilled by the supplier, which part requires the response, the form and length of the response that is required within the information. Of course, questions can be asked. That will require explanatory answers, and also know the ability of the supplier to supply what is needed, and also maybe judge the supplier against some of the following criteria. Like, you want to know their financial position, you want to know their previous experience or track record, you want to know you want to get an initial indication of the approach, and also maybe any added value that the bidding company is able to offer the organization. You want to also get their reference. Now, of course, you can make inquiry and get information by requesting for quotation from the supplier. Now, this is simply a specification on the basis of what the organization wants to communicate to the supplier regarding the requirement um, that the potential supplier must meet or need, or needs to meet. So the potential supplier can submit quotation or tender to the organization. So requests for quotation sometimes have been used in majority of straightforward routine purchases, especially within government circle. Then, of course, you do inquiry by tender. You can make inquiry by tender. Now, if tendering is required, then an approved tendering method must be used, and this may be subject to specific directive, for example, from government in public sector. Now, how do we define tender? Tendering is defined as a procedure by which potential supplier are invited to make a firm, unequivocal offer of the price and terms which unacceptable shall be basis of subsequent contract with the organization. So, a competitive tendering is a formal process involving the following step: one, identification and selection of suppliers from whom to seek bids; issue of invitation to tender documentation to selected supplier; three, receipt of assessment of tender; then, of course, for selection of preferred tender. So this is actually the formal process that is involved, step that is involved in competitive tendering. So competitive tendering aims to, obtain complaint tender from. It aims to obtain tenders from qualified tenders in a single round tendering. So the invitation to tender document being only to those who have been pre-qualified. So a procedure that will often, saves much time, effort for both. Both parties will want it to come up, so that instead of wasting much time. So Most of us have seen that done even in our organization. We've seen that done even in government places where they post on the national, um, you know, paper for you to do your RFQ, request for quotation. People submit bid, you put everything there. Of course, the pre-qualification is done. Then the right group of people ask you, come and tender a bid for us. Then, of course, during the tender of bid, um, one of the things that is done according to the Public Bureau Act is that you use what we call meet. Uh, most economical, economic tender is used. So all potential requirement. So sometimes um, this also step will also help in as assisting you to set out the best requirement in inviting suppliers to tender their document. And some of the steps you can use is in the document you are putting for them to, I mean, requesting them, inviting them to tender, is that you put instructions on the tender, form of tenders, how it should look like, contract award criteria. You put your technical specification of what you want them to meet. If it's things that require drawing, you get drawing. You tell them the necessary health and safety plan you want so that you're not contravening any legal laws or any legal requirements, pricing schedules, and also you stipulate terms and conditions. All right. So there are actually three general methods used for to tender, especially when it comes to public tender or private tender. One of them is we have the open tender. Uh, Here, everyone, you invite everyone that you feel are available in the market to tender a bid. Now, number of suppliers will come and will respond to you, and the aim of this one is for you to reach a wide supply market, and in order to achieve a competitive bid at the end of the day. So, a bid is what I mean. A bid is actually a submission or a response from a potential supplier setting out their proposal offer in accordance to the tender inquiry document. So we have what we call selective tender. Now, what is selective tender? Selective tender tenders are invited to those few suppliers who you feel can meet the selecting criteria and have been pre-qualified. So those you select them to come and tender. You have single tender. Here you invite only one person to tender. Right now, you're not tendering them. You're asking them to come and negotiate with you on how best to make the work come to pass. Then, of course, um, you do evaluation of tender, and of course, in evaluation of tender, there's always a joint technical or commercial exercise. I mean, in evaluation tender, you understand that that is actually a technical and also a commercial exercise that allows for all criteria that meet once they've submitted, all right. And of course, how do you evaluate those tender? Your evaluation will be based on one, maybe quality, quantity, timing. So the objective of tender assessment is for the purchaser to establish which is the best, offer. Then now we're talking about if price is the only one criterion among several needs, then you want to look at what we call, what I was trying to talk about, meat, which is the most economical, advantageous tender or best value for money. If it's price you're looking at to evaluate. So now, which means that the tender price are only a starting point. Now, to determine what we call the meat, it is necessary to establish the whole life cycle cost, like we said earlier, when we are looking at right price. So, in addition, factors that cannot be quantified in monetary terms should be taken into account. For example, you can look at some factors that, like initial price, cost of financing, um, you know, terms of payment, performance and technical guarantee, declared damages, conformance with program. All these can be, factors that can be affecting the immediate cost of acquisition. But the truth be told, um, if you are not using price, of course, please also take account things that are not monetary in nature, and so that it can be considered when you're evaluating your tender. Then of course, you want to consider sometimes medium-term consideration also when you're evaluating something like these are not building costs, running costs, cost of spares and operation of the equipment you're bringing after sales service. Terms of consideration like component replacement, retrofitting costs, dismantling costs, disposal costs. How do I dispose this if I'm done with it? How do I dismantle? These are some of the things you look at. when you are looking at some tender. And of course, uh, if you're looking at evaluating tender based on technical assessment, one of the things you look at is the compliance with specification in the tender, the performance parameters, quality. You're looking at maintenance and also the overall operating life cycle of the maybe machine or what you are looking at. Then, of course, when evaluating, you also look at commercial assessment also. Now, commercial assessment could look at the terms of payment. You're looking at the program risk. You're looking at any commercial, qualification risk. Now, but tender also has one disadvantage. One disadvantage is that sometimes it is it takes a longer time, and also sometimes necessary and clarify technical points, and supplier may wish to give a better alternative that can only be found when you're negotiating. Sometimes you don't get it. Some technical points cannot be stressed even in paper, but you can only find it when you're actually negotiating with your supplier. So tendering sometimes is slow and is expensive to administrate, and also expensive for suppliers also because of the cost of going front and back, the cost of printing document, the cost of so many things. Training also has no use when it comes to monopoly situation. Also, tendering conflicts with tendering has comes in conflict with lower collaboration approaches, newer collaboration approaches, and also working more closely together with supplier. And also it also prevents you from working close with supplier. Tendering also prevent post, you know, tender negotiation. Right. So we are also inquiry by you appraising or evaluating supplier. How this is done, a supplier appraiser will not be governed by the strategic, performance of products or material being sourced, and the results will be based on criteria established by the purchaser, liaison with the user or customer, and the purchaser knowledge will be put into account when you're evaluating. So a continuous review of the appraisal system and potential source will be need to be managed. So there are a spectrum of different appraisal that can be carried out, and this option will be choosing along with consideration of of different, previous usage involved, and the strategic importance of a purchase. And this spectrum we will look at maybe no appraiser. Now this will be done where the value of purchase is low and there's no risk in the market. Now you can have elemental appraisal questionnaire. This is where the value of the purchase is low, but of course significant value which merit further analysis, or where there is element or risk, in the marketplace. Example will follow, like when you talk about maybe an elemental questionnaire weighing factors method. Maybe when you look at the questionnaire, you look at quality, you look at time, you look at service of delivery, you look at that, then you put numbers attached to it to weigh whether you are doing well, the product is doing your the procurement process is doing well or not. Of course, you have comprehensive appraisal questionnaire and visit to supplier, and this would be used where you have value, the value of the product is high and the risk is extremely high. So you want to appraise this process, systematically for such, product. Then we have what we call, so you want to evaluate the supplier ability. All right, you want to assess the supplier ability based on one capacity, based on the number of quality of their workforce. You want to based on also the age and quality of their equipment. You want to assess your supplier based on the quality of their policies, the size, their layout, their location of their premises, environmental policies, lead time, liability records. That's how you want to actually evaluate the supplier or appraise your supplier ability. Of course, you also want to try to appraise your supplier attitude. Now, how do you do that? Your supplier may be assessed from the interpretation of the market, especially a long-term relationship, and their attitude depends on their shared goals. You want to look at their organizational strategy when it comes to the beating the market. You can also assess them, your supplier, based on the organization. How do you do that? You can evaluate them, um, for example, based on what is the organizational culture, what is their line of communication, what is the level of trust and delegation available within the organization, what is the level of integration in the organization, what is the what how is the internal and external, what is the level of internal and external relationship that is available within the organization, what is their management style. All right. Also, you can also try to see to evaluate your supplier based on their financial data. Appraise them based on their financial data. Information given by the supplier or collected from other sources. You want to appraise them and evaluate them to determine their profitability, all right, to determine their gearing, looking at their long-term loans that the company uses for funding, all right, whether their loan, their BC, or their is, I mean, it's very high, all right. Of course, you want to look at their liquidity. You identify the cash flow position of the supplier. You look at the stock turnover, the stock turn, where you identify how experienced the company, you know, is in rotating goods through the company, and also the financial turnover divided by the value of the stock on hand. So it measures the entire physical goods stock turning. So you can use these ones to evaluate them. Of course, you can also evaluate your supply based on the organizational structure. All right, what is the kind of structure they have? Because the kind of structure will identify their strength or their weakness in maybe the supplier or culture, for example. An hierarchical structure will be cumbersome. If you have a tough structure, it can be cumbersome. It could be bureaucratic. I mean, in fact, it's bureaucratic. It restricts easy flow of communication and extend lead time due to inherent, silos of functional process within the structure. You can also, if you have a flat structure, it offers quicker response for time decision making and communication. For example, where supply chain management needs to adopt a faster philosophy and result, I mean, across the functional management structure. So you look at based on that their structure, you can evaluate them and know whether they want to do. Of course, you can appraise your supply based on the product data. Maybe research, you do a research on their quality, their standard, their specification. You do all this deep research and you look at their product and you can appraise them based on the product data they are producing. You can also appraise them based on supplier production process, all right, when applicable with information on capacity and production facility. You can appraise them based on that. Now, of course, from that we move to negotiation. All right, everybody negotiates. Private sector will like to negotiate with their supplier, and maybe not try to say, okay, we want to involve tendering as in regards to a public sector. All right, so because um, public sector really don't do negotiation. Normally, if you look at the Bureau, especially in Nigeria, the case study, looking at the Bureau of Public Procurement Act, it's not a thing that you negotiate one on one. It's a thing that you do a tender for. But sometimes, uh, organization like public organization might go into direct negotiation. When the following conditions are found: one, single tender action has been approved. You know, suspected cartel among suppliers. Price are overknown, consistent award historically to the supplier. So to test, sometimes you do to test or evaluate the market, and sometimes they need to get more than one supplier. So you can go into the direct negotiation with somebody that is existing, of course, sometimes with monopoly. So what is the negotiation? Negotiation can be defined as a resolution of conflict through the exchange of concessions, actually. Now, this will mean trading concession, not donating them, and only undertaking with people who have the power to vary the terms and are able to vary these and can give you something, in return. Then, when and what to negotiate. The total negotiation process can be either comprehensively action or only part of the process may be used. So, comprehensive negotiation should take place when the value and risk involved in the contract represent considerable commitment from the buying organization. So, full negotiation should not take place for low value, low risk material, and the negotiation process here should only be followed to an absolute minimum, as the onus is on the buyer to bargain for the best deal centered on quality, on quantity, and at the lowest price possible. You know, then what to negotiate? What do we negotiate? Negotiation can be conducted from three perspective of the customer and the buyer and the supplier. The customer needs must be met. The buyer must guard against risk and obtain value for money, and the supplier must be respected as looking at each of the three perspectives, which means customer may wish to influence its supplier selection, quality, and time of delivery. Uh, Also, supplier may influence the price, quantity, and delivery of material. So also the buyer may decide on what criteria, have priority within the negotiation and use of skills to achieve the best possible deal, which achieves these, perspective. So when we talk about this perspective, when customer may wish to influence the supply selection, quality, and time of delivery, the customer may also carry out more authority and may be a specialist, in the product being purchased. But when you have a supplier influencing price, quantity, and delivery of material, then there may be only few suppliers, or they hold the patent right to that product you are looking at buying. So that is what you negotiate. So now it will be seen that generally negotiation will come under five heading. You're negotiating for quality, you know, quality, quantity, price, place, and time. Those are the three heading you're negotiating on. Of course, what do you do when you're planning negotiation? So one thing that must be done when you are planning negotiation is that first and foremost, you want to get information gathered. And information should be gathered on one, the customer requirement, including the specification and timing. You gather information on the marketplace, including number of suppliers, alternatives or substitutes that are out there, technical advancement, market restriction, market incentive, and what other buying organizations are doing. You gather information on your supply ability, including financial stability of your supplier, capacity, their resources, their reputation. These are some of the things you look at. So where the negotiation is involved, a long-term agreement and the supplier motivation and environment would want to be, analyzed. So this is when you're planning for negotiation, you need to gather information uh, very well. So when you're conducting negotiation, what do? You ensure that the agenda, you ensure that the agenda you drafted are well covered and all areas are discussed. If possible, you write down and confirm that all the areas that are agreed upon. You use elements of sometimes behavioral persuasion, use logic, use emotion, sometimes you use threats, you use body language to secure some outcome you want. All right. This is when you're conducting negotiation. Sometimes also you ask relevant questions and ensure that you get comprehensive, acceptable answers. All right, to the questions being asked. You're critical to the questions you ask. You open questions like who, what, where, when, why, how. All right, you can use that to gain information and understand your supplier very well when you're negotiating with them. You can also, gain movement by trading options you have organized prior to the meeting, options you want to give them. Of course, you can use tactics, you can use ploy to reach your objectives. All right, tactics are skillful maneuvers employed to reach your objectives. So you can use ploy, you can use some cunning ways, but of course, ploy is considered to be unethical by the supplier. So while you're negotiating, how do you control the negotiation process? Sometimes you control by giving concession and agreement that is clearly recorded and verified. Then, of course, you go further to put implementation plan that can be used to identify milestones. Both parties will look at it. And of course, you can actually control negotiation by bringing vendor rating system that can be implemented to monitor performance against the contracts. So now these are some of this chart shows you using where you can bring behavior in while negotiating. Negotiation is people dealing. All right, it's people dealing with people. Therefore, behavior is important. Behavior of what people do and what they say is very important to be noted, and it is involved the different following type of negotiation based on the following: your approach and empathy. When you are in a meeting and you realize that this behavior, the approach of the negotiator, the supplier is low, his empathy is low. Now, what you bring, on ground is the fact that it's take it or leave it. You bring it in. All right. Now, when you have a situation where the empathy is high, but the approach is weak. The approach is low. This person is weak, and of course, you have empathy for that person. Then of course, you can use, um, you know, you consider them weak and find a good ploy to come in. Then of course, when you have somebody you're dealing with and the approach is very high, but your empathy, they don't get empathy at all. All right, this you will need to work very well to pressurize them to calm down, because no human empathy at all in their in their behavior. But of course, when you have both empathy, you see both empathy and approach. Understand that you know you need to be ideal, you need to be too persuasive when you're dealing with such people. Empathy, yes, will is good, but of course, when your approach is low, it means sometimes you could be weak, but it will take time not to actually, take you out of the contest purely. All right. So people is what you deal with when you're negotiating, and when you understand that. So when you're negotiating, there you realize on the table what are the traits, all right, um, of this person you're dealing with. For example, a trait of a good salesperson would be like offers thorough presentation and good follow through, has a good working knowledge of their product line, is willing to go into bat for the buyers within the supply company, shows knowledge of the market and willingness to keep the buyers informed. Then, of course, he has a trait that he or she has a good working knowledge of the buyers and product line. Of course, he uses diplomacy in dealing with operating with you while you're on the table. Then, of course, a good salesperson will follow ethical sales purchasing practice. Then, of course, how do we understand people? From this chart, you can see the different characteristics of people. But I want to call them, you have the cool blue people, a fairy red people, a sunshine yellow people, an earth green people. It is good. You can actually look at that in the principle of how you act, what you do, the four temperament of an individual. Where you have the fairy that can be a choleric person, the person can be competitive, demanding, then you can have the sunshine yellow person. These people can be said to be what we call a saguin, because they are sociable, they are dynamic, they are enthusiastic, they are persuasive. Then we have the cool blue people. These are cautious people, questioning in the fear of life. You can call them a melancholy. Then, of course, you have the green earth people. These people can be, we call them they are phlegmatic, because they're always caring, they're encouraging, they are sharing. You have this kind of people. You can adjust them, and you know how you tackle them while you meet them on the negotiating table. All right. So there are different models for negotiating. The following, you can some of the models that can use. You can have where you have hard bargaining, soft bargaining. You can have different way. When you're having hard bargaining, the concept is the model for hard bargaining is your goal is victory. When you're having hard bargaining, your goal is to demand concession from the person. Hard bargaining comes with, you come hard on the people. All right. But when your goal is for partnership and collaboration, instead of going for goal of victory, you use, okay, um, what outcome we can amicably reach together, because your goal is to partner and not to drive an hard bargain. Instead of going out of people, you are being soft on them, but hard on the problem. All right. In hard bargaining, sometimes there's always distrust, because you don't trust that people. But if you're looking at, going for a partnership in terms of your bargaining, you're independent of your trust. You can look at it on this chart. Same thing for soft bargaining. You're friendly with your participant. You're not adversary. Your goal is agreement. You're not goal victory. You want to make concession, not demand concession. You can see this as different models of bargaining. You can have bargaining, partnership, and soft positioning bargaining. These are the different models that comes with bargaining. So with this one, I can clearly tell you that we've come to an end of this program, this chapter, which is actually sourcing and procurement procedure and processes. Please feel free to send in your questions. I'm willing to answer it. Thank you very much. Have a good night, a good afternoon, and have a pleasant day or a good night rest. Thank you. Obrigado. Please read up, read up, read up. Questions will come in. We're going to have time to treat past questions come October before the exam. So please don't be afraid of the exams. The exams are good. So forgive my running nose. I'm solving code. That is why I am like this. So thank you very much. Good night, and have a happy night rest. Bye bye.